practice, a life of practice, is very broad, extremely broad, and probably impossible to explore all of that breadth at one time. So hopefully we have a long life of practice and we can explore this aspect, this avenue. In the broadest possible brushstrokes, we could draw out 3 avenues of practice, very, very broad brushstrokes now. One avenue is learning how to be with our experience, how to meet our experience, how to accommodate our experience, especially that experience that's difficult, whether it's of the body, of the emotional life, of the mental life, of the external circumstances, that we are willing and able to open to that, to hold that experience, to draw close to it, to listen to that experience, whatever it is. That we are able to be with things as they are, and that's a huge and lovely part of practice. Sometimes that's what people mean when they say vipassana practice. Actually, I don't think there's such a thing as vipassana practice. I think it's even broader than that. And it would include what I would call the second avenue here. Vipassana means to look in ways that bring freedom, to actually look at the present moment experience in ways that begin to unbind and loosen the suffering. So finding sometimes just a little bit of a different view of an inner or an outer experience in the moment so that the suffering goes out of it. Sometimes a radically different view, and practicing those different views so that the suffering goes out of experience to a small degree, to a great degree, or completely. And then in this very broad brushstroke picture, the third avenue we could say is the whole realm of cultivation. Now, of course, these aren't separate and they intermingle. But the third avenue is the whole realm of cultivation. The cultivation of calm, of samatha, samadhi, what we're talking about here. Depth of consciousness. Cultivation of love, of compassion, of generosity, of patience, of all those lists that the Buddha goes on about. And again, very broad brush, that makes up a life of practice, and of course there are many more avenues than that. On this retreat, focusing mostly on one particular avenue. Any avenue in life, any avenue of transformation, of growth, whether it's meditative or otherwise, any avenue, any practice, any technique, any orientation will have its benefits and its pitfalls, any of them. And it's a real maturity to not only realize what the benefits of one's particular avenue are, but also what the pitfalls are. So oftentimes we can point out the pitfalls of someone else's way they're practicing. We're not so aware of what we've chosen. So each practice has its pitfalls. There's no such thing as the perfect practice, the perfect avenue, the perfect way of practicing. There's this third avenue, we could say, of cultivation, and within that, this retreat is focusing on one particular cultivation, which is the cultivation of calmness. And then within all that, what I would like to talk about tonight is how this deepens, the possible depths of this particular cultivation. So what I want to talk about is what's called the jhanas. Some of you may be familiar with this word. I want to talk about jhana or jhana practice. So jhana is another Pali word. It's Jhana, jhana, lovely word. Dhyana in Sanskrit. So I'm aware that for most of the people in the hall tonight, most of you, not all of you, but most of you, 90% of what I'm going to say is not in the realm of your experience yet. It's not in the realm of your experience. So I'm really, in a way, you can kind of just sit back and hear, it's like, a slideshow of the outer limits of the solar system or something. You don't have to worry about any of it. I just want to, in a way, paint a picture, a little bit of a map, and give a very, again, broad brushstroke overview of how this practice unfolds. To me, it's very interesting, though, just as a precursor, it's very interesting what happens sometimes in people's consciousness when we hear about experience or realms of experience where we're not there yet. And what can happen? So tonight, as you're listening, perhaps just to notice that. Notice what goes on. Sometimes we hear something and the reaction is, what I'm doing is completely useless. Rubbishing one's own practice, dismissing what one has as irrelevant, only that's important. Or we feel bad about where we are, or we just snatch after that. Or sometimes, often the case, and I've been sitting in this hall, there, looking this way, and the teacher, the speaker is speaking about something very profound, and for some people it's just a disconnection. For some reason it doesn't seem to apply to them, doesn't seem to have anything to do with their life. This couldn't possibly be relevant to me. And sometimes the person's not even aware that this is going on, and will sort of start doing the nails and looking out the window. And sometimes the person isn't even aware it's going on. There's for some reason, some disconnection comes in. So all I'm saying is, I think it can be a loaded issue. Maybe it's irrelevant, I don't know, to everyone here, but I'm just saying it because I think sometimes it can be quite charged. And so to include that in the awareness and just see what happens inside. So jhana practice, what does it mean? This word jhana, it used to be, in the old translations, used to be translated as trance, which is a terrible translation. Gives all kinds of strange, sort of cross-eyed imagery and, turbans and I don't know what. It's better translated as something like absorption, meditative absorption or something like that. So this is really, again, it's what happens when the samatha really begins deepening. And this is a very short retreat, so again, I'm painting a picture of possibilities in the future. So the Buddha went into great detail about this, very, very precise, sort of very, quite rare in spiritual traditions, that degree of precision about states of consciousness. And that's in a way what jhanas are, they are states of consciousness. And he outlined 8 states of consciousness that are particularly, he felt, and of course I agree with him, relevant, really, really helpful, transformative, leading to liberation, leading to freedom, leading to immense well-being. So very, very broad brushstroke with this, and just to give a description. The first one, what's called the first jhana, is coming out of what we talked about yesterday and what's already in some people's experience, this piti, this pleasant physical sensation that's happening in meditation. What happens is that the meditation progresses and the piti gets more and more common and begins to build. At a certain point it becomes quite steady and relatively strong. Could be very strong, could be not so strong. The actual strength is not so important, but it becomes quite steady. And at that point a meditator can learn with practice to take the piti, the pleasurable sensations themselves, take that as an object of concentration. Leave the breath. Some teachers say keep the breath and mix it in with it. I'm happy to go either way. And maybe it's good to learn both ways. But take the piti and, in a way, take that as a focus, absorb the mind, the consciousness into the piti, meaning just really get into it, really enjoy it, and allow it, encourage it, learn how to make it suffuse the whole body. So the Buddha's words, direct translation, saturates and suffuses the whole body, leaving not a spot untouched. Drenches the whole body in this piti. So everything, all the normal body sensations replaced with piti, with this pleasure, and one, as much as possible, surrenders to it, opens to it, enjoys it, sinks the mind into it, and maintains that as a state. And it's really, really nice. And after a while, and people progress at very different rates with this. It's usually a matter of months, whatever. It depends on how, what the conditions are. But at whatever rate, and again, it's just the conditions that are coming together. There's no judgment there. After a while, this piti transforms. And what was an intense physical feeling with a sense of sort of background happiness, the happiness begins to come to the fore. And the physical feeling is still there, but the happiness begins to really take prominence. And incredibly fulfilling happiness. Happiness almost the like of what these are very altered states of consciousness, very outside of the realm of our usual experience. So we don't even usually come close to a happiness like that. Intensely fulfilling happiness could be very bubbly, it could be quieter, and a whole range in there. Immensely fulfilling happiness with love in it and all that. And the piti is still there, the physical feeling in the background. And again, one learns how to sustain that, suffuse the whole body and the whole mind in a way with that, and kind of surrender and enjoy and plunge into it in a very full way. And there's lots more to say about each of these, so I'm just kind of whisking through in a way the bus tour of John. After a while, that happiness is almost like the heart has drunk its fill. It's complete. It feels a complete fulfillment. It's really completely satisfied with the happiness. And what happens then is a kind of profound contentment. It's really a fulfillment there. And that contentment takes prominence. And that contentment deepens into a almost otherworldly sense of peacefulness. At first in here, but then a sense of peacefulness actually expanding out in a way to almost seem like it's embracing everything. Profound tranquility. So all those, picture ads that one sees sometimes of, the holiday in the tropics or Greece and the nicely bronzed couple are lying on the beach with the Campari and all that. It's supposed to make you feel like this really feels. When you get to the beach, it's often not quite it. There's something. This is somehow touching the being at such a profound level of tranquility, of peacefulness. The whole being, almost the whole world, seems bathed in that. And it's not necessarily that these states are limited to the sitting meditation. They can kind of spill over. These qualities can spill over into any posture at any time, really. And then that tranquility matures and deepens and sort of descends into a stillness, a complete stillness of being. Extremely bright, extremely present, but immensely still. Nothing else really going on except stillness. And again, the whole body has become kind of dissolved in that stillness. The whole mind, in a way, has become dissolved in that stillness. And then that that too can, for some, deepen, and a state of immense and actually infinite spaciousness. This is the fifth, what the Buddha called the realm or the sphere of infinite spaciousness, of infinite space, And all sense of physicality, all sense of form disappears, and there's nothing but space. Nothing but space, infinite space. That too can deepen, and the space becomes as if it's, in different ways, sort of a manifestation of consciousness, as if consciousness itself is infinite and spreading infinitely throughout the cosmos. So this has its parallels in other traditions in cosmic consciousness and that kind of thing. And there really is a very real sense that consciousness is not in here, somewhere in here. It's actually spread in some extremely mystical but very real way throughout the cosmos, throughout the universe. At deeper levels of this, everything is consciousness. Piece of paper, the floor, the walls, the birds, the trees, it's all consciousness, animate or inanimate. Truly remarkable states of being. But even that can deepen. And this consciousness, in a way, gets absorbed in a sense of what's called infinite nothingness. The only thing that's there is an overwhelming sense of nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing inner, nothing outer. And that may sound incredibly bleak or scary, and to some people it is at first, in the same way that the piti can be scary at first. But one learns how to find a home in these states and absorb and be transformed by them, drink their fruits. And the last one, the eighth one, is even that sense of nothingness disappears. And it's almost, you're really at the borderline of what language is capable of communicating. Something called the realm of neither perception nor non-perception. The mind is not even resting, the awareness is not even resting or conceiving of a nothingness. It's sort of as if light is coming through a room and not landing anywhere. There's still a subtle sense of being in that state, but there's not really anything perceived in that state. So all this, I'm very aware it may sound completely abstract, I'm like, I don't know. And in a way it is. It's way beyond what our normal, conventional, common experience is. So that's the very briefest possible descriptions of, as I said, the bus tour. Each of them have particular insights, and this is where this, for me, gets very interesting. In the second jhana, this happiness, one goes in and out of this remarkable happiness, and after a while the being has tasted of that happiness so deeply and in a way frequently that the compulsive pull of sense desires, I need to have pleasant food, I need to have this or that, I need to have whatever it is, it just pales in comparison for good in one's life. It completely relativizes the place of our addiction to sense pleasure. That comes out of the happiness for a lot of people. It's hard to say what the first jhana, the piti, what comes out of that. I think, for me, maybe it's just a sense of possibility, what the possibilities of consciousness might be, of a consciousness not caught up in the hindrances, not caught up so much in issues. I'm not sure. The tranquility, the peacefulness, the profound peacefulness, in that state there's a sense of not needing or wanting anything at all to be in any way different. No pressure on self, no pressure on the world to be at all different, not one hair's breadth different. A genuine sense of wishlessness comes in there. And the insight is, one sees true peace is not so much in getting what I want, but it's in the letting go, it's in the wishlessness, it's in the non-wishing. And it's not just a kind of intellectual, oh yeah, that's a nice Dharma thought. It's somehow taken in. This is really the fruit of all this stuff. It's somehow gone into the cells, taken in a way that is really learnt in the body. The fourth jhana, this immense stillness is a hugely powerful state. Immense power in the mind there, immense strength in the mind, strength that we really need for our life. There's a sense of very, very deep rest there. The whole being, mind and body, come to a complete rest, deeper even than sleep. The sense of the self at that point is also extremely quiet. I mean, it's quiet in any of this, but it's extremely quiet. There's barely any whisper of a self sense. So we're getting a very real sense of what maybe life might be like when we're not so much living it from the self. In a sense that in a way one has to let go of the self to reach profound peace. It's also what the Buddha calls equanimity. It's very steady, that state. In the realm of infinite space, the fifth jhana, there's many insights. One is just a sense of spaciousness that comes deeply into one's life. The other, I feel it's very significant, is begins to impress very deeply on consciousness a sense of oneness as a real reality, as a real fact of life. So this sense of separation, me here, you there, this table here, begins to dissolve. We enter in a very real way to a whole different perception of reality, and reality as oneness. In this state of infinite space, it's primarily a kind of physical oneness. So all that stuff that we hear in science, that all the molecules in this room that we all are made of the different atoms and molecules, they all originated in the same Big Bang of some big star somewhere, and the atoms drifted into the solar system, etc. And that's a sort of nice, scientific thought, but it becomes a very real, heartfelt, overwhelmingly heartfelt reality at that point. Or that everything in the universe originated in the Big Bang was literally one at one point. Very mystical kind of understanding, it's a whole different opening. Again, as I'm saying, it's just to I'm not actually sure what the reactions are, but just to be aware. In the sixth jhana, infinite consciousness, that oneness goes beyond the physical to an even deeper sense of oneness, where it's all one consciousness, it's all one mind. So this cosmic consciousness sense that's sometimes found in the Hindu tradition. The seventh jhana is extremely significant in terms of freedom, and one goes into this and comes out, and the sense of different things, or things existing, either inner things like thoughts and emotions, or outer things, begins to not be taken so seriously. We lose our complete belief in the reality of things. Infinite nothingness, infinite no-thingness. The reality of things is dissolved, is punctured. And of course we're still perceiving things outside of that jhana, but it's if we question enough in it, and if we go deeply enough in it, we really begin to question. The level of freedom that comes into one's life at that point is profound and extremely expansive. In the eighth jhana, the last jhana, it's the sense that everything, even the sense of nothingness, everything is a perception. It's just a perception. It's a built perception. That's not to say it's not real, but it's just to say everything is a perception. And that relativizes it. So even suffering is just a perception. And there's a sense of immense relief and freedom with that. That's the bus tour. So the Buddha, to make this practice transformative on a deep level. Sometimes people slip into these states in a vipassana meditation, or occasionally, in the shopping mall or whatever, occasionally. Admittedly rarely, but if we're talking about samatha practice and jhana practice, then one really wants to be able to kind of enter into these states and remain there. Then they're less and less kind of random events that one can't control, or they just come up for a few seconds or minutes or whatever. One really enters and remains in this state and sustains it. And this may sound, probably all sounds, I don't know, already far-fetched, but it's possible, and again, there are people even in this hall right now, it's possible that a person can learn with practice to move at will between any of these 8 states. And so one just says to oneself happiness, and the happiness appears, and one can enter into it. And one says to oneself nothingness, and everything becomes nothing, and one can enter into that, and can ping-pong around by intention, by will. One can enter into it and leave it and stay there, etc. And the Buddha talks about mastery. And as I said, this is a very real possibility. This is probably, I don't know how it sounds, but it's a very real possibility with practice, with the right work, etc. So, if we talk about deep samatha practice, talk about jhana practice, and there's a huge debate been going on about this, especially in Western Buddhism, for the last 30-something years, about whether there's any point in this, whether it's a distraction, whether it's an attachment, etc. Or another question is, how much of this is a jhana? For instance, some of you have been experiencing some piti. How much? What makes a jhana? And so there's 2 factors that I feel there's a bit of confusion around this area. One is how strong, let's say, the happiness is, or the piti, or the tranquility, or whatever, how strong that is. So it can be extremely intense, or it can be much, much more subtle. The other factor is how much absorption there is, how much we're so into this state, this happiness or whatever, that we actually don't notice anything else. We don't hear anything, don't feel anything in the body, and in some teachers will say, it should be that someone could come and chop off your head and you don't even notice. I think that's a little over the top, but these 2 factors, the strength of it and the degree of absorption, there's the assumption obviously that it has to be really, really strong and completely absorbed, and that's what jhana is. And there's this question, when is it jhana and when is it not? To me it's a completely irrelevant question. It's not asking the right question. What's more important, what the Buddha points at, is a steadiness of the state, and this completely pervading the whole body. Those factors are important. It's very easy for people to hear about jhana or want to practice this way, and suddenly it's this thing that we want to attain, or this thing that ego or self wants to wrap itself around and define itself or whatever in that way. So we assume, or we might assume, put it that way, it's common to assume that, of course, so-and-so says it's jhana if you can still hear something. Some other teacher says it's only jhana if your head can be chopped off and all that and you don't recognize. And we assume, well, the deeper one must be true, that must be better, that must be the real thing. But, to quote Jesus, by their fruits you shall know them. By their fruits you shall know them. So there's a point to jhana. Something should be coming out of it. It's not some, stripe that we give ourselves or something. It should be leading to insight and peace and well-being and that kind of fruit in our life. If it is, then it's working. Then it's it. If it's not, then kind of so what? And it may be, and I don't know because I don't have enough experience talking to enough people, that someone is extremely absorbed and no insight is coming out of it at all. So, how do we know if it's jhana? Well, how do we know if a tree is an apple tree? If it gives apples, and the fruit of jhana is insight, is peace, is well-being. So, a lot of the fruits of jhana, a lot of the benefits are just kind of extensions of what I've already what I talked about yesterday and probably in the opening talk about the extensions of samadhi. But just go through there, expand a little more. Huge, very real confidence comes into one's practice, just even tasting a little bit of this. And I don't know, maybe for some people, even in the very short period of this retreat, I haven't been any jhana or anything, but it's just having a sense of something's possible. When we can develop a confidence, a very real confidence that our happiness, we are able to be happy in and of ourselves. We're less dependent on the outer circumstances being exactly how we want them to be. There's a very real sense that we have a reservoir and resource of inner happiness that is less dependent. That gives in one's life a huge sense of confidence about moving into new areas, about moving into the unknown, about losing this or that in one's life. There's just the confidence. I know happiness can be there. Tremendous for the lessening of fear and the opening in that way in one's life. It brings confidence in oneself, brings a confidence in the Dharma. That we begin to go through this even just a little bit and you see, oh yeah, okay, my experience corresponds to what the Buddha's talking about. And then you go maybe the next stage, maybe the happiness opens itself up. And you realize as well, that's what he said too, and look, it maps one after the other. And then it begins to come, well, if this is true, maybe the third one's true, and etc., etc. And one, instead of the Dharma, can seem very abstract, especially if you read the original discourses, can seem like, this has nothing to do with my experience, I don't know. And we can be very unsure about the whole project of Dharma. But as one begins to tread and taste the fruits in a very real way, it's one really begins to have faith in the whole thing, and in a way in everything that the Buddha said, in a very experientially based way. And as I said yesterday, tremendous soil for insights. The most the most prime conditions for insight to grow is out of this very bright, very awake, receptive, pliable, malleable, soft, open mind that comes out of jhana. Extremely wonderful soil for insights. And insights just begin to arise spontaneously for most people, just spontaneously. It doesn't even have to go hunting them. Very deep insights come. Quality of life, the whole quality of life begins to take on another dimension. There is a kind of disenchantment gradually, as I said, with sense pleasures, but with really everything that does not lead to freedom, everything that's kind of not really helpful. We're just less pulled by it, less enchanted. Tremendous healing, tremendous healing. Of course, not all healing comes through just deep samatha, and talked right at the beginning of this talk, the whole broad range of practice, so that there's dealing with the difficult and listening to that and exploring that and uncovering that and learning how to take away what is supporting difficulty. And then there's also tremendous healing that comes out of these very lovely, very deep states. Intuition, all kinds of intuition flower, particularly intuition about insight, intuition about practice, about ways to practice, about how practice works. Sensitivity, all this is increasing, receptivity. The whole sense of that we typically we have as part of the human condition of viewing a problem I'm having as being something out there. This situation is a problem. what was said, what they said to me is a problem, this illness in the body is a problem, this emotion is a problem, that whole view of a problem being out there begins to be undermined in a very, again, a very lasting way. We lose the grip of that view, that belief that problems are out there. And then there's difficult to explain and don't really have time to go into it, but this word emptiness, what it really means is that all this, inner and outer, all this world, all this field of experience is not real in the way that it appears to be real. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's not a nihilism. It's not real in the way that it appears to be real, as totally solid and inherently existent. This is the most difficult topic in the Dharma. We don't have time to go into it tonight. Sometimes a person in practice is beginning to get a sense of the not quite reality of things. And for some people this is extremely scary. The very ground of existence, it begins to tremble and they don't know on what they are standing. For some people it's great, it's just yahoo right away. I don't know if they're in the minority or the majority. I think it's the minority. For most people it's quite scary. And the well-being, the healing, the loveliness from these deep states of samatha, samadhi, help to ease one into that, into kind of accepting the not quite reality of things, the emptiness of things, accepting that mystery of things in a way that's not so existentially angstful for the heart. And that's extremely significant actually, because then we feel like we can progress, looking the truth deeper and deeper in the face without this kind of keep having to turn away or back off or slow down or just kind of stop practicing for a while. There's a very real sense we can just keep looking and uncovering levels of truth or whatever you want to call about it with an ease, with an opening, with an accommodation in the heart. It's an immense gift. About a year and a few months ago, we had a retreat, a 3-week retreat on loving kindness and compassion as a path to awakening. And there was quite a lot of samatha. As I said, samatha can come out of loving kindness and compassion too. There was quite a lot of samatha from many of the people in that retreat. And one of the retreatants said to me at one point, probably 2 weeks or so through, he said, I'm getting a lot of, nice, deep, calm states, and I don't know if it was jhana or not. I didn't really go into it because I wasn't that interested at that point. But he said to me, it seems to me that I'm better off practicing without samadhi, without samatha, because that will apply more to my life. Because when I go out, I'm not going to have all these fantastic states of calmness. So I need to learn how to practice when I'm agitated, when my mind is thinking a lot. And I can see a lot of integrity there, in the thinking. I didn't ask him how he was planning to distract himself on the retreat. But at the point, there is a tremendous. It's true what he said. We need to learn to practice in both modes. You can't rely on just being in very deep states of samadhi all the time. But so we need to learn to practice, as I said right at the beginning, when there's difficulty, when there's agitation, find our way with that, open to that, navigate through that. But not to underestimate the carryover effect from samadhi, from samatha. It really, in a way, it gets into the cells with deep practice, gets into the cells, and will have a transfer effect when there's agitation, a lot of thought, etc. So both are fruitful, and this is part of what I was saying about the breadth of practice. Both are fruitful. We need to be able to practice whatever the conditions, inner or outer. Okay, then last night I touched on also this factor of whether all this leads to attachment. And in a way, as I was explaining how the jhanas unfold, one ripens into the other. And when, for instance, we move on to the tranquility, well, the piti and the happiness we become less attached to that. We've got a new toy to play with, in a way. They, by themselves, let go of the attachments before, and they're a huge, as I've said already, a huge lever in letting go of our other attachments in life, our less healthy attachments. Reflecting on this, it seems to me there are three ways that attachment does and could arise to deep states of samatha, to samadhi. The first is to the pleasure of it, and this is often what we hear. Don't do that because you're careful of the pleasure because you'll get attached to it. And people do get attached, but it seems to me that the attachment is much more common when the experience is rare. So if we just have one or maybe two instances of this in the context of a retreat or some other situation in our life, we say, what was that? It's so different, I want to get that back. If there's a skill developed and one moves, say with the piti, and it just becomes something that's accessible, not all the time, but just a fairly regular visitor in one's life, this pleasure in the body of the piti, we actually become less attached to it. It's like water or something. We are actually attached to water, but it's not a problem. It's not a problem because we know, I'll just turn on the tap. So when there's a lot of it, actually there's less attachment. Second way that one might get attached to the pleasure, one might get attached, the ego gets puffed up. Look what I can do. And again, very understandable, very normal even. Again though, only if it's rare. With enough practice, what happens, as you've already seen over the days here, it goes like this. It's so completely wavy. It's so completely non-linear, the practice. There's moving into what's lovely, and there's being shunted out, turfed out by the hindrances. And that just happens over and over, no matter actually what depth one gets to a larger or small degree. One cannot maintain these states all the time, no way. What one sees though over and over, that's actually nothing to do with me, it's nothing to do with self. It's not me being clever and kind of gifted or this or that or whatever. It's when the conditions are there is this state. When the conditions are there, there's a state. When the conditions aren't there, no state. When the conditions are there for the hindrances are there. When the conditions are not there, no hindrances. And one really sees it in terms of not of self, in terms of conditions coming together. And the whole way that the ego might get attached to all this is just gone. This should happen, and if it's not happening, it should be something one reflects on. Attached to the pleasure, attached to the ego sense. The third way is, I think, the most insidious, and in a way it doesn't get talked about much. It happens in the much deeper states, say the last four or five jhanas. Attachment to view, meaning a sense of consciousness being infinite, of the real nature of things being consciousness itself. That kind of thing. It's extremely powerful perception when it comes. And there's a very real possibility that one takes it as the way things are, as the truth of things. One of my teachers used to say, Ajahn Thanissaro used to say, it's actually really helpful to explore all this, because it's also not necessary to explore all these states. It's a possibility, one of the possibilities, but it's not necessary. So like I said, when you're listening, it's just a kind of slideshow of what's possible. But he used to say it actually can be very helpful, because one might slip into some of these states in insight meditation or something and think one has discovered something ultimate, because one hasn't had enough experience seeing, it's just infinite consciousness or whatever. It's not actually ultimate yet. So knowing what is and what is not ultimate, extremely significant. It's also possible that the way we're working is taking one object, in our case the breath, but it could be metta, it could be anything, and developing the steadiness, developing the collectedness of mind, and then that deepens. It's also possible that vipassana meditation, being with things in that openness, looking at things in different ways, being with the openness of experience, actually also leads to the jhanas. There's a way that can happen. The jhanas are actually a product of letting go. It's not so much about concentration, it's about letting go. When there's a lot of letting go, some very deep letting go, some or other of these are potential. So when we're doing insight meditation, what we're really doing is letting go of clinging, or what we should be doing is letting go of clinging. And if we let go of a lot of clinging, some state like this can be there as a potential. Or we might be letting go of ways of perceiving and shifting into other ways of perceiving. And again, just to paint the picture, it is also possible that one, with acquaintance with all this, one develops a skill of working in insight practice and using the insight practice to move into the jhana. It's almost as if filtering out, one lets go in insight practice, and a happiness comes because one has let go, because there's more openness, and then kind of filtering out that happiness from the experience and collecting it and moving into, in that case, the second jhana. So, like I said at some point yesterday, jhana is actually more to do with letting go than it is to do with feverishly holding something in place, which it might seem like at first. It's more to do with letting go, and it's almost like one lets go of more and more, and less and less appears in consciousness. So all that, I'm aware, to go back to what I said at the beginning, there's probably quite a range of reactions to all that in the hall. Some people fascinated, some people completely disinterested, bored, some people horrified, maybe, some people feeling bad again about, all that. Just painting a picture of possibility. Just painting a picture of possibility that's out there, all that I've talked about today is a huge chunk of one of these avenues, and probably for most people that's a good chunk of time developing all that. And certainly if you're talking about that kind of level of mastery, you're talking about a long time of really dedicated practice, but something that one can, in a way, pick up and put down. So a person can be on retreat for a while and get to a certain place, and this isn't a guarantee, of course, but get to a certain place in this deepening and kind of put the bookmark in the book at that point and go off and do, live one's life for a while and come back on retreat and almost within a few days open the book at where one has left the bookmark and carry on the journey. And of course that's not a guarantee. But I think the main point I want to say is perhaps what I want to say is hear this how you like. Hear it how you like, If it's not interesting, if it's even somewhat repulsive, which might be possible for some people, that's okay. It's okay. It's not necessary, all of this. But for some people, it might be interesting. It might be fascinating. And what I would like to say is that it's a very real possibility. And I feel that it's, in a way, a duty to put out what the possibilities of practice are, so that it's known. This is a possibility. This is a possibility for us as human beings, and we know what the possibilities of that breadth of Dharma are that I was talking about in the beginning. Let's have a moment or two of quiet together. So tomorrow morning there will be a time for questions. There won't be any interview groups. There'll be a time for questions and answers in here all together. Perhaps we could take a few minutes now. I don't know if that brought up any questions, or if there are any questions about the practice right now. Yeah, Julie.
Hi. I just wanted to ask if you could just say a word or two about how the Samatha practice can help you become kinder.
Yeah. In its beginning stages, what we're mostly talking about here, in a way we need a certain degree of calmness to be kind. We need a certain degree of openness and presence and kind of that kind of receptivity needs to be there. If we're too caught up in our own kind of angst, our own worries, our own agitation, we're not present, we're too, in a way, self-absorbed in the wrong kind of way, and the kindness can't be there. So in a way, a climate of letting go of the kind of usual entanglements allows a natural kindness to come up. As kindness, in a way, is a natural state of the being when it's not entangled, in that sense. As one gets deeper and deeper into all this stuff, one of the things that begins opening up is, two things. One is there's more and more of that sense of well-being, and it really is as if one has enough, and it begins to overflow. Now one doesn't feel like I need to be kind of looking after myself all the time, or I'm a beggar in any way. There's literally enough, and one can feel like one can give. One's more present to give. Excuse me. As it gets really deep, this bit is touching on what I've talked about tonight, the whole notion of separateness begins, as I mentioned, begins to really be questioned, really at a very deep, meaningful level begins to be questioned in one's life. So the whole notion that I'm here and you're there and we're 50 or whatever separate people in the room begins to be questioned. It's not that one doesn't perceive, me and you and all that, but as a reality it begins to be questioned. When there's non-separation, the kindness is a matter of, course. It's just it's natural. Does that answer?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You talked about all the different paths having pitfalls.
Yeah.
Could you talk about some of these pitfalls?
Yeah. So all the different paths have pitfalls. What are the pitfalls of samatha? I suppose there's a way that when one's practicing samatha, that it's possible in the initial stages that one does get a bit self-protective and that kind of thing, a bit into preserving one's own, I don't want to be bothered and don't interrupt my meditation, that kind of thing. That's one of the possible pitfalls. Another is any of these attachments, like I said, but hopefully they'll be cleared up with that kind of questioning. I actually feel that samatha is maybe got less pitfalls than some other paths, but that's quite a rare view to have in the world. Mostly the pitfalls that it would be attachment in the different kinds of ways. But nothing exists in isolation. So that if one is doing samatha and all this, one is, I hope, bringing in questioning and insight at the same time and reflecting on one's experiences and what it means about everything. It is possible, and I've actually met people who seem to be able to do all this, and there's very little questioning, and then it's pretty strange what comes out of it. It's quite can be quite off balance, either sort of insensitivity to others, or very strange ideas about what's real and what isn't real and that kind of thing. But not in a sort of schizophrenic way, but in a sort of what's ultimate truth and what's not. But hopefully, this, like I said at the beginning, those paths are not really, those avenues are not really separate. So hopefully, there's all the time this insight and this questioning coming in, and one can, the way that samatha itself would lead very deeply to, liberation or whatever it is, when it's used with very strong questioning, and one's really reflecting on all the experiences, and questioning what they mean, what their implications are. Rebecca.
You talked about the possibility of being on retreat, practicing, going back to daily living, going back on retreat. Was there any suggestion in that this is a practice that wouldn't just also develop in your daily sitting alongside your normal life?
Yeah.
And given that there are these kind of mind states that are quite old from a general perception, whether that's something that you think would need sort of some support structure to go, to sort of pass through or something.
Could everyone hear that? Question was about whether these states that I talked about tonight, whether that's accessible in everyday life, or whether we would need some kind of support structure for that. Did I miss something?
Sort of two questions. Whether it's something that just will develop in daily practice, and secondly whether because of the altered states of mind,
whether it will develop in one's daily practice outside of retreat, for most people, my sense is not. I mean, maybe the first one, maybe a little bit of PT, not more than that. Very rarely. I do know instances of people though who, are quite remarkable in what they can kind of access, but it's very rare. It's very rare. Mostly it needs a retreat environment. And then by the second question, support structure, do you mean a retreat support structure, or I mean people to talk to?
I mean, like, if you were practicing that in your daily life and it was happening, would that, in a way, like, would one feel safe going through that without support?
Oh, I see. Would one feel safe going through all this in daily life without support structure? I think if it was happening, if it just happened out of the blue, if nothing much ever happened in your meditation, you suddenly found yourself in infinite nothingness, it would probably be quite freaky. And I know, that's definitely happened to people, not in their daily life, but on retreat even. That nothing much happens, and then one day they're suddenly in this void of nothingness, and it, scares the living daylights out of them, basically. If one's going step by step, then it's similar to this bath analogy that I was given before. You're getting a sense that this is okay, I can trust this, and a sense of it being okay, and the next stage and the next stage. And there's really a sense of, it's okay. And that gives a kind of softening to the whole process, if that makes sense. But all this stuff is probably, if one was going through any of this, it's probably something you'd want to talk about with someone, just because it's so kind of wow, and you'd want to be sharing and learning and making sure, and just But it's not like you would feel mad or anything. Chris,
to continue this out of a retreat setting with this kind of practice, would you recommend any other particular kind of meditations to hook it onto, to have the two together that would be particularly compatible?
Anything really. You could hook this up with anything. If you were just interested in deepening the samatha, then I would just do this and maybe metta practice, for instance. But even as I said, if you're using the vipassana in the right way, it should be leading to letting go, and that letting go will feed the samatha. But it will, as a sort of, if you want to have two practices in your life, you could have any two practices, and they would be very compatible. Yeah. Is that answering? I'm not sure I'm getting quite what you're saying.
Yeah, it was just following on from Rebecca's question just now about given that it is possibly difficult to do out of a retreat setting, if there could be some kind of balance or some grounding element that would make it more doable.
It's not difficult because it's not grounding, it's just difficult because they're very subtle, refined states to access, and it needs a lot of conditions to come together. It's not difficult because it's disorienting in any way or ungrounded. So it's really just a matter of how much letting go can there be in one's life outside of practice, how much practice time, how much is built on retreat, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of different factors have to come together. Is that Kate with the question? Yeah.
Why do there appear to be so few retreats on samatha and the jhanas?
Yeah. Is the tape on?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. No, I'm kidding. Partly it's because it's a very difficult practice. So this whole retreat was an experiment. I viewed it as an experiment. Don't ask me whether it's a success or a failure. My sense was a lot of this stuff is more accessible than is generally known. And I just wanted to present the beginnings, and people have a sense that they can begin on something. To really get into it, I mean, my sense was if I was going to do a real samatha retreat, I would make it a month long period, so that people can really get a sense of, I can, know what the first jhana really is, and have some even sense of mastery with it. Just really get into it. So partly it's that, it's the length of retreat and what's required, and partly it's all kinds of things. People are going to move at very different rates, and there's going to be this question which I talked about of people measuring and feeling the pain of that, which it's difficult. It's difficult stuff. Then there's a whole kind of historical kind of thing about how the Dharma has been transmitted to the West, and it's just that the particular traditions in the 30 or 35 years of the Dharma in the West that are prominent in the West, the particular traditions, I'm not going to name anything, but those particular ones are very almost anti-samatha practice, anti-jhana, and those traditions have had a huge effect on the whole way that Dharma has spread in the West. My guess and my hope is that as the Dharma grows in the West, there will be this broadening that I was talking about right at the beginning, and the very real sense that it's fine to do this. It's fine to do this aspect, as I've got those three aspects and many more avenues. It's fine to do that for a few years, and people will respect. Oh, you're doing that right now. That's great. I'm doing this, or we're doing this one together, or whatever. There'll be a sense of the breadth, and the samatha and jhana practice will come into the whole of Western Dharma in a very real way. That I don't feel it's there as a sort of collective maturity yet. Is that okay? Was that what you were getting at? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Okay, yeah.
No, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, when the practice deepens, it seems to be like a backlash that takes place, and it can really sort of, dent one's confidence in the process.
Yeah. Could everyone hear that at the back? Yeah. So there is often, as I think I mentioned yesterday, and you've probably maybe noticed for yourselves, as the samatha deepens, mind collects, and it does deepen. There's a state, that feels more collected, feels deeper, and it all seems to be going swimmingly, as they say, and then boom, back come the hindrances, back come at first some issue or other, and a lot of difficulty, agitation. There seems to be, sometimes it can seem like, if not every time, a lot of the time, when it kind of feels like it's deepening, maybe deepening to a new kind of, just a slightly new level of experience or intensity or whatever, there's this backlash and a difficulty, usually in the form of, some hindrance or the other, although we may not even recognize it as a hindrance. Why that is, I don't know. Some people call it a purification, as if you're actually somehow purifying. Again, I take that very delicately. I really don't know. What I do know is that it's very common. And at first it can be, as you say, very disheartening. But part of the practice, what I was saying in the first talk on hindrances, it's the less sexy part. One realizes this is going to happen over and over. And one learns to expect those waves and becomes more and more able to deal with the hindrances, more and more able to see them for what they are, without them blowing up into these issues, this, what I said about these seeds with the sort of fangs and the hooks. That we see that process going on. And it's not that the backlash doesn't happen, it's just that it doesn't blow up so more. We take it much less personally, it's just a human thing, get less involvement in it. And we just learn to kind of surf those waves, and so that in the end it doesn't become disheartening at all. That's just how it goes. It's just really okay and part of the process. That much, viewing the hindrances as really okay, really not a self-assessment or a judgment, not spinning into story. If that's all that happened in samatha practice, and wasn't any of this, wonderful lights and fireworks I've been talking about, that would be great. That would be absolutely great. And some people, and I think they're in the minority, and this is where I would disagree with sort of what's common with it. I think they're in the minority. Some people will never get any of this stuff, but they will just keep deepening and deepening the calmness, and they will still get this understanding of the hindrances and ability to let them go. And that much is huge, a huge sense of space and relief and kind of ease that comes into one's life over a period of time. So it's really just part of the practice. It takes a while to kind of learn, it's just one of these waves, and I can see it for what it is without getting so sucked into what it seems to be saying about me or about life or about another person or about here or wherever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay. I think last one, Bill.
I wonder how to understand how accessible those states are from a point of view of a beginning meditator.
Yeah.
Should the meditator think, of course people differ tremendously in their readiness and their abilities, but should the meditator think, well, if I practice an hour a day for 5 years, maybe I'll be able to attain the jhanas, or do I need to become a monk or a nun and live as a monk and a nun for 10 years, intensive daily practice, and then perhaps attain the jhanas, or what kind of realistic aspiration could we have to attain states like that?
I would say that either of those is too extreme, and as usual the truth is somewhere in the middle. And as you said, people vary tremendously. The conditions that a person is bringing, the teaching that someone gets, the orientation that someone gets, their own state of physical well-being, all this stuff. Your digestive system has a lot to do with it, really, the Buddha said. And I know. If you meditate, what was the first option? Sort of an hour? 1 hour a day for 5 years. I don't know, I wouldn't really even think that way. It's more, but it's more a sense of this is a possibility. At some point, it may become more or less interesting to one, and it's more like I haven't mentioned it until now, and in a way we've just been talking about deepening the samatha, tuning in on the comfort and the pleasure, and that will take you. It's like just to be where one is and let it unfold, and then it may be something to move into. Usually if I'm teaching jhana practice, I don't even use the word jhana. Because again, it's just something that self will grab around and will make a thing of and make a whole big deal about. Have I got it? Haven't I got it? Is it? It's more like, how's the pleasure doing? How's it feeling in the body? Is there, what's there? And let's talk about building that. Let's talk about nourishing that. Let's talk about getting really connected with that. Otherwise, it's just, it's not that helpful. So it's more like be where you are and build what you have and see what's possible. I don't know if that's maybe not a satisfying answer, but I don't think one needs to be a monk or a nun. I think one needs to take practice seriously, certainly, but I don't think one needs to be a monk or a nun, absolutely not. Okay, very last one.
It's not a question, it's just really, it's only based on conditions anyway, isn't it really? So
Yeah.
the conditions could come together at any time.
They could, but it's the conditions are inner and outer and past and present and all kinds of things. But yeah, it's basically based on condition. Okay, I think enough. Let's have just another moment of quiet here. So, Sarah, would you mind ringing the bell at 5 past again? Thank you.